Good. So apparently it's already 4. First of all, thanks everybody for being here. It's the good part of being one of the last sessions, but we don't know if anybody wants to leave to go home early. So this talks about upgrading your D7 modules to Drupal 8. I am João Ventura. I work for Wunderkraut in Germany. Not for long ago, so I've been in the Drupal community for a long time. And my most popular Drupal.org modules are these two. Webcheck knows me as Mr. Print, so that's quite unfortunate because it's my unwanted child at the moment. So the Drupal and the print module maintainer since 2007, 8 years and counting. So I started with the D5 version, and then I backported it to Drupal 4.7. I have no idea why I did, because I think I never actually used Drupal 4.7. And there's 71,000 whatever usages of the module. The print module story is a bit, when I wanted to start with a content management system at the time, I really liked one feature that Joomla had, which was the ability to have these nice icons to print PDF and to print to the printer. And I was like, oh, but I have that in Joomla, I have to have Joomla because I want it. And but I was like, yeah, the Drupal is so much nicer. So I basically did the best to have both the worlds by having Drupal and then having to take on the burden of having those nice icons over there for Drupal. Then I started maintaining the AdSense module since 2008. That's when I started only with Drupal 6. Then I backported it to Drupal 5. And both modules have the D7 versions. And they will both have Drupal 8 functions. The print module cannot be called print anymore because print is a reserved keyword and Symfony apparently doesn't like that I reserve the namespace of the PHP keyword. So it's going to be called printable, and it's out there in a very early stage. And now that Drupal 8 is finally released, I will start taking care of it. The AdSense module, I ported it using the DMU that I'll talk about later, in March, and it's mostly ready. I haven't tried it in Drupal 8.0.0 yet. So a bit of my experience on this session is going to be on what I did with AdSense also. So what did I do on this when I ported stuff to Drupal 7? So there was this amazing page that I call the Bible of 6 to 7 ports, and I'm going to actually show that page because it deserves to be shown. So it's like how to use this guide, and then as time went on during the Drupal 7 development, people came here and they wrote specific instructions, and you can see this long list of instructions that when you got to the end of this, you would have what was the example in Drupal 6 and what happened to that example in Drupal 7. So you could kind of come here, do a Control-F, search for things, and it might be that your question on why did my module that was working in Drupal 6 and now doesn't work in Drupal 7 broke down, and what do I need to fix it? So that was that was the Bible. It was a very useful resource. There was also the coder upgrade module that some of you might have used to try to upgrade your modules. That I don't think I really use it for print in that sense, but I did use it for other occasions. One thing that I learned painfully from the Drupal 7 ports was I kept porting my modules to be in sync with the latest dev release, and I was quite tired by the end of the Drupal 7 release cycle, because I think I ported the module like 4 or 5 times since I made it work. Then it broke down completely, then I had to change everything, make it work again, and especially when they entered the render array, everything went bonkers. But in retrospective, it actually seems pretty trivial. There was a new database layer. There was this breakdown of the hook node APIs into hook block, hook node XXX, and hook blocks into hook block XXX. And there were a few other significant changes, but there's still mostly a one-to-one API mapping between Drupal 6 and Drupal 7 that, doesn't exist so well in Drupal 8. So now is the time to port Drupal 8. I've been saying this for a few months already. Actually now is definitely the time to port Drupal 8, since Drupal 8 is out, and it's so much nicer. As you could see by Gabor's presentation this morning, you don't need 15 different modules to enable translation in your sites. So, of course, there's the Bible of Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 ports. And this one I actually want also to show, because it's frustratingly small. As in, when it says here that it's incomplete, it should actually, incomplete is an understatement. This thing has almost no information at all that's useful. There are change records that developers have to create when doing these changes from between Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. And I think there's a link anywhere in here. But if you ever try to read the change records, those things are not usable. And among others, Drupal 8 release cycle took so long, it's 5 years, that if you read the change record from the beginning, you might actually figure out that in between that change record being written and the Drupal 8 release, a lot of it has already been obsoleted. So you'd have to read all the change records, and it's like crazy. I don't even think that any beginner would be able to do that much as anyone else. So yeah, so there will be maybe eventually some documentation, but we need to start working now, because Drupal 8 was released yesterday. Yay! And unfortunately, I was on a flight to here, so I missed both the party here and both the party in Frankfurt. Anyway, so the thing is, it's a completely different Drupal. I don't know if you are already used to work with Drupal 8. Everyone here already using Drupal 8 or still in Drupal 7? Still in Drupal 7? Well, anyway, so I used to say that it's only called Drupal because it looks like Drupal, and it was built by the same people that used to work on Drupal 7. Other than that, it's completely rewritten from scratch, I would say. We could eventually use one of these source code comparison tools to see how many lines have survived from Drupal 7. I don't think there will be many. So now Drupal is mostly object-oriented. There are still some hooks in there, some theme functions, some there's still the template pre-process functions also there. So all the hooks still live in functional land, but a lot of other parts of Drupal are now object-oriented. There's all these technologies that are, well, old and used, that were the subject of the previous talk, so Symfony. Drupal is now HTML5. HTML5 is so old now that it's no longer used, but anyway. We're using Twig for all the templates, the PHP template. There's YAML, or basically anything that is serialization of information. So all your info files are now YAML files. There's the routing, it's YAML. There's the configuration that gets serialized from your data into files. That's also YAML. There's a WYSIWYG editor finally in core. Yay! This for me, this one is important today because the one thing that I learned from Drupal is whatever is in core gets extended a lot. And the WYSIWYG editors were so horrible in Drupal 7 because, well, there was this WYSIWYG module that tried to unify part of it, but the end result was not so big. So you couldn't really want to say, I have this module that adds a button to WYSIWYG, because then you would have to write like 4 or 5 different implementations of that button. And I'm kind of hoping that that's no longer going to be the case. So if anybody wants to do an implementation of a WYSIWYG editor that's different from K editor, they will have to provide an API that you just write it for core, and the rest gets used to it automatically. So what are some of the changes that we do in Drupal 8? So on the left side is some Drupal 7 code from my AdSense module. On that side is some code from my Drupal 8 module. Well, code. So one thing I did, because this variable get function, the syntax for it is variable get variable name and then default value. And this default value for me was always annoying because you could so easily get out of sync if you didn't, if you wrote a certain default value somewhere and then you would change your mind and say, okay, now the default value should be something else, but you forgot it somewhere, and then your module starts behaving funny. So what I did was I did these defines for the default value, which are actually giving me trouble at the moment. And well, then I got the value from the variable get, and then in install you should then delete your variables, because or else you are going to be polluting the system's the variable table in Drupal, and that's well, if you ever go and see a well-used Drupal 7 site that has a lot of modules installed and removed over the years, you'll see that there's so much junk of variables that are there from modules that were installed a decade ago, let's say. Maybe even in Drupal 6, if it's a site that was upgraded from 6 to 7. And those variables are just junk in there. So those days are gone. Now it's the YAML file that both contains sort of like the definition of your variable and the default value. So in this case, it's an empty string, and then you just get it with a somewhat more verbose function, where first you initialize a config object that will contain your settings, and then from that config object you get the variable itself. Menu routing. So hook menu is gone, it's dead. We don't do hook menus anymore. I think there's still a hook menu alter though, for some reason, or at least there was one until recently. And so, for instance, this is the settings form for the AdSense module. The menu was like that, normal book menu, and now the routing is contains more or less the same information, but it's all YAML. First we define the path, it's basically the main, the first element there, and then there's some elements that are inside to Drupal, which is the title, well, and then form, which would be what class is actually responsible for this certain path. And then you have some requirements there that used to be the old access arguments. Some other changes, so the blocks are now plugins. If you have worked with plugins with Drupal 8, they are amazing. So one of the things that the plugin system uses is annotations. And why does it use annotations? Mostly because if it was code inside a class, the class would have to be loaded to obtain the data that's inside the class. And with annotations, you don't need to have the class polluting your memory space. So if you don't need the class, you don't need to auto-load it. And you can just grab the, you can have the annotation part, just grab the data regarding a plugin. And in this case, it says that it's a block plugin that has access managed at block ID. That admin label is the title, and then there's a category of the block. And the functions are more or less the same. You have the block submit, which saves your block. You have the build configuration form, which is to configure your block. Build, which is shows the content of the block, and it should return a renderable array. This is how blocks look nowadays. Configuration forms are more or less the same as before. So in this case, it's one of those settings forms. You can see the form API is more or less the same. The one thing that there are new elements. So one of the things that I used to do in AdSense was a validate part, and in this validate part, I checked if a certain pattern was being matched by the value, and you don't need to do special validate functions anymore in your code, because now the form API can already match a given pattern. So you can do validation. In most cases, you can do easier validation, unless you need some kind of special logic, in which case you can call your validate function. So the good part, or what I used for AdSense, was this Drupal module operator module, which you can download, and it handles mostly the boring parts. It converts your module info into a YAML info file, and it will convert your hook menu into routing, and it will convert your forms, but your logic will still need to be converted from whatever you add to the new version. Mostly, I would say that you should think of your code as a rewrite and use this as the first step in that rewrite. So what I would say normally was to install DMU, as it's called, which is the initials for the module operator. You can look at instructions on that URL, but it's so you use Drush to download it, and then it requires a lot of packages. So you use Composer install to install its dependencies, and then you enable it, and then you can use this operations. So it's got two that I would say are very interesting. Brush DMU Analyze, which will tell you what you need to do in your module to make it Drupal 8 compliant. And DMU Upgrade, which will actually change your module into a Drupal 8 module, hopefully. Currently, it's slightly broken, as we can see in a few minutes. DMU Clean will remove that code. I never run this thing. I prefer to delete my code myself. But DMU Index is it just indexes the module. I think it's mostly an internal system that you can, an internal function that they make transparent. And DMU list provides a nice list of all the existing plugins that exist, that manipulate your code and transform it from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. Which are a lot. Let me see if you can see this easily. So, DMU list. So there's 4 different kinds of plugins. There's some that index, others that analyze. Not much difference between those. One is converting your D7 to D8, and the other are cleaners, which is removing D7 code that's no longer applicable. The interesting ones for this talk will be converters, and there's all of these. So I've seen, for instance, the first one converts Drupal 7 blocks to plugins. And one example when it was working very well was when I had these, for instance, these blocks in Drupal 7 code, and it created this function for the AdSense module. And then I did some other stuff that created that interface. But most of this, so here it was an empty function. It was just return nothing. Build was basically a markup, return markup. Configuration form was already filled in a bit, and block submit was also empty at the time, but the scaffolding was pretty interesting already. And there's like 10 and 10s of these. Unfortunately, this one is not working very well. So I would normally want to do the following. So usually you can do one thing, which is DMU Analyze, AdSense, and it will index it, and it generates a report where you can see what it thinks. So basically told me, variable del has been removed, variable get has been removed. Form set error is now a method of some interface. Well, your core value is the 8.x, of course, and etc. It tells you if many has been removed. Automated tests must be in PSR. And so lots of stuff has been removed. User access, for instance, now it says it's now account interface has permission, and team is now being renamed to team and should never be called directly. true, you should be using the render system. And the other part, which would be really, it was working for me a few months ago, and it's broken again. Then it worked, and then now it's broken again. Unfortunately, I think I will spend some time tomorrow on the sprints trying to figure out what's the problem here. So basically, it's coming up with this error. And before that, we do this is where it's currently failing its links. Sorry. Links. So these are the ones that are currently working. Unfortunately, without links and without routing, it's not doing one of the things that it's supposed to do, which is to convert your book menu into the AdSense routing YAML. But it already created the AdSense permissions YAML, as you can see. So my old code from so I have this AdSense permissions, which is the Drupal 7 part of it, and it's automatically converted all of this function into this YAML. And I can also show you the results. So in AdSense, there's a module which I never, it's like I'm not very, it's one of those things that you want to hide under a rug, and this is one of those sub-modules. So I never actually ported this one out. So it's still the basic result of when DMU was working. And so this routing was created by DMU, and at the time there's this book menu here that was transformed into that routing. The requirements, in this case, it couldn't figure out the variables, so it did this fix means and put some dev code in there. One other thing that it did was it converted this admin interface into this plugin, which is into the form class, which is one of those form IDs. So you have get form ID, and you have submit form, which is the submit part, and the build was basically created out of the settings form class function that was in admin.in. So it's basically a transposition of the code. And then, yeah. And the info YAML got also automatically converted from the .info. The thing is, of course, that without it working properly at the moment, it's not that I can I would want to normally ask someone if they had a D7 module that they wanted to try and convert. Like we could try that. I'm pretty sure it would also break, so it wouldn't be too much of a nice exercise. So if anybody's doing sprints tomorrow, I will try to fix this again and see if anybody's interested in joining me or trying to get this running. Might be very interesting for the sprints. And this is almost. Well, again, the time to port your modules is now. One of the things that happened with Drupal 7 was, and that I saw from my modules, was you port your stuff to Drupal 7 and then nothing happens. Because Drupal 7 is released, there's a few people installing your modules, but heavy usage, everybody was still using Drupal 6. And then views of Drupal 7 came out. And wow! Everybody's using your modules now. This, I don't think, will happen with Drupal 8. There's no major blocking config that would prevent anyone from doing the Drupal 8 site already. The users in core, there's a lot of stuff that got moved to core. Maybe if you really need stuff like display suits or panels, you might not be able yet to create a Drupal 8 site. But on the other end, the new system is so configurable, and Drupal's display suite is already working somewhat anyway, that you could even, on one end, either get away with not having a stable version of display suite or panels, or just going with the default theming layers and create a site out of it. And the other part is that when you're writing your Drupal 8 modules, consider it as a complete rewrite. Make it a new project, let's say. You remember what you did right, you remember what you did wrong, and you should, if your module is in any way using some kind of plugin system where you have either sub-modules or stuff that can be easily interchanged, those should be not plugins, because the plugin system in Drupal is amazing. You can extend it very easily. You just add some annotation parts, and the annotation system will read your enhanced plugins. Make your code shine with objects. This is you can still write functional code even inside classes, but if you follow the object-oriented approach, it's way better. So think of what of the data that you're manipulating, and think of it. Can I make it an object? And then can I make it the methods that work within that object, like get, setter, and the methods, the business logic on that data. Can I make it all object-oriented so that I'm not calling a function and passing in some parameters and retrieving some return value, and actually have proper OO. And the final advice is one that I got from my modules is try to start taking away everything that's in the .module file until, probably try to not stop until that .module file is completely empty. Your modules do no longer need a module file. It's one of those interesting facts of Drupal modules that if you don't need to use hooks, nor you need to use the template system or the process functions. You don't need anything about module file. You just start moving all that code into classes, and by the end of it, your module will be both better in terms of architecture and a lot nicer to work and be with. And that's it. Any questions?
So are you the maintainer of that?
Yeah, no. I'm just using it. I try not to ask for maintainership of a lot, because it happens frequently that when you start contributing to a module, eventually some guy will tell you, hey, you're not the maintainer. So I inherited, what was it, web form views recently because of that. That was fun. And yeah, DMU, so one that also happened to me, it's actually used in a lot of internal things in Drupal, is the Git release notes for Brush, which I also do there. DMU, I think I will try to contribute, but not become maintainer, because time. But it's something that I enjoyed using a lot, and I keep trying to follow it, and they keep breaking it, and it's quite annoying. But I think now that finally the APIs are more stable, that we can focus on figuring out what the problems are. No more questions? Good. I hope you liked it, and I appreciate you coming, and I would encourage you to start porting your modules.